The role that separates the extraordinary from the average. Taleb's theory of antifragility. Some systems thrive when shocked. They don't merely resist damage, they need it to evolve. This hidden pattern separates those who merely survive from those who transform adversity into exponential growth. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Throughout history, the most successful organisms, ideas, and individuals have followed this counterintuitive role. They become stronger when exposed to volatility, randomness, and disorder. Is why certain businesses flourish during economic collapse while others crumble. It's why some people emerge from trauma more capable than before, while others remain permanently broken. The difference isn't luck or resilience. It's a property that Nassim Nicholas Taleb calls antifragility. This is the forgotten advantage that has silently shaped evolution, markets, and human achievement for millennia. It explains why protecting systems from stress ultimately weakens them, and why those who deliberately seek certain types of hardship consistently outperform those who avoid it. What appears to be risky is often the safest path, while what seems safe frequently creates the greatest danger. This paradox has remained hidden in plain sight, governing the rise and fall of civilizations while we remained oblivious to its power. Before we continue, if you enjoy unraveling hidden truths and uncovering the forces that shape our world, make sure to click that subscribe button. Your support allows us to continue bringing you the insights that truly challenge how we think. Now let's go deeper. Most of us have been taught a fundamental misunderstanding about how systems respond to stress and disorder. We've learned to categorize things as either fragile or robust. Fragile things break under pressure, like a teacup shattering when dropped. Robust things resist damage, like a rubber ball bouncing back to its original shape. But Taleb identified a third category that our language doesn't have a word for: systems that actually gain from disorder. Consider your muscles. If you protect them from all stress, they atrophy and weaken. Subject them to the right amount of stress through exercise, and they grow stronger than before. This isn't just resilience or robustness. It's an active process of becoming better because of stress. This is antifragility, and it's everywhere once you know how to see it. Evolution itself operates on this principle. Each generation faces environmental stressors that eliminate the weak and favor beneficial mutations. Without predators, diseases, and harsh conditions, species would never develop their extraordinary adaptations. The entire process depends on volatility and random challenges to produce stronger organisms. The most successful species aren't those that avoided stress. They're the ones that developed mechanisms to benefit from it. When we examine human history through this lens, a striking pattern emerges. The most enduring civilizations weren't those that eliminated all threats. They were those that developed internal mechanisms to transform challenges into advantages. Ancient Rome didn't survive for centuries because it avoided conflict. It survived because its republican institutions were designed to harness internal competition and external threats to strengthen the state. When those mechanisms were replaced by imperial stability and comfort, Rome's antifragility diminished, and its collapse became inevitable. The same principle applies to knowledge systems. Scientific progress doesn't happen through comfort and consensus. It advances through the brutal process of conjectures being subjected to refutations. Theories that survive this gauntlet of skepticism and testing emerge stronger, while fragile ideas shatter against reality. The scientific method itself is an anti-fragile process designed to benefit from the disorder of competing hypotheses and experimental failures. But the concept extends far beyond biology, history, and science. Economic markets, technological innovation, personal development, all exhibit anti-fragile properties when properly structured. The question is, why do we consistently fail to recognize this pattern? And more importantly, how can we harness it to transform our own lives and systems? The answer begins with understanding why most modern institutions and lifestyles are designed to eliminate the very volatility that would make them stronger. We've created a world that values predictability and comfort above all else. We medicate minor fevers that actually strengthen our immune systems. We bail out companies that should fail. We remove all obstacles from our children's paths, denying them the struggles that would build their character. This obsession with stability has even infected our language. We speak of safe spaces, risk management, and stress reduction, as unquestionable goods. But what if some spaces should be intellectually dangerous? What if certain risks should be embraced rather than managed? What if some forms of stress are essential for growth? Our vocabulary betrays a deep bias toward fragility that blinds us to the benefits of certain kinds of volatility. In 2008, when the global financial system collapsed, most banks crumbled under the pressure. But some institutions not only survived, they thrived. What separated them? The fragile banks had been optimized for stability in normal conditions, eliminating all redundancies and maximizing efficiency. The anti-fragile institutions had maintained seemingly wasteful reserves and diversification that appeared inefficient during good times but provided critical options during crisis. They weren't just preparing for disaster, they were structured to turn disorder into advantage. Warren Buffett embodies this principle perfectly. While others panic during market crashes, he famously gets greedy when others are fearful. His investment approach isn't merely patient. It's explicitly designed to benefit from market volatility. He maintains large cash reserves that seem inefficient during bull markets but allow him to acquire valuable assets at discount prices during downturns. This isn't just contrarian thinking, it's anti-fragility in action. This pattern repeats itself everywhere. The writer who faces rejection develops a unique voice that eventually captivates millions. The entrepreneur who experiences multiple failures learns precisely what doesn't work before building a billion-dollar company. The immune system that encounters controlled exposure to pathogens develops the ability to fight off deadly diseases. In each case, the stressor itself becomes the source of advantage, but only for systems designed to transform adversity into growth. Let's make this more concrete. Imagine two business strategies. The first aims to make steady, predictable returns with minimal volatility. The second accepts higher variability and occasional small losses, but creates exposure to potential massive gains, what Taleb calls positive black swans. Traditional metrics might favor the first approach because it appears less risky. But over time, the second strategy dramatically outperforms because it's anti-fragile. It's structured to benefit from the unpredictable. Consider tech startups versus traditional businesses. A restaurant might generate reliable cash flow but has limited upside. A tech startup might burn cash for years, with most failing entirely. Yet the few that succeed create such enormous value that they more than compensate for all the failures. The startup ecosystem as a whole is anti-fragile, even though most individual startups are fragile. Each failure contributes knowledge that increases the likelihood of future successes. The system gains from disorder even as individual components suffer from it. This reveals a profound truth. There is a fundamental difference between risk that can destroy you and variability that ultimately strengthens you. Most people and institutions fail to distinguish between these two types of uncertainty, avoiding all forms of disorder and thereby sacrificing their potential for growth. They see only the possibility of downside without recognizing the hidden opportunities that volatility creates. The most successful individuals throughout history intuitively understood this distinction. They didn't merely endure challenges, they deliberately arranged their lives to benefit from volatility. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher, practiced voluntary discomfort by occasionally living as if he were poor, even though he was one of Rome's wealthiest men. This practice ensured that he could thrive under any circumstance, making him anti-fragile to fortune's whims. In more modern times, consider how Steve Jobs' devastating ouster from Apple in 1985 enabled him to develop the perspective and skills that would later make his return so triumphant. His wilderness years founding Next and Pixar gave him precisely the experiences he needed to transform Apple into the world's most valuable company. Without that painful disruption, Apple would likely have remained a niche computer manufacturer, and Jobs himself may never have evolved beyond his early limitations. Or take Oprah Winfrey, whose traumatic childhood and early career setbacks forged the empathy and resilience that made her one of the most influential media figures in history. Her suffering wasn't incidental to her success. It was instrumental to it. The very experiences that could have destroyed someone with a fragile mindset became the foundation of her extraordinary impact because she developed an anti-fragile response to adversity. What these examples reveal is something even more significant. Anti-fragility cannot be achieved through theory or planning. It emerges through direct exposure to volatility, through skin in the game. This is why academic theories often fail in practice, while street knowledge, earned through trial and error, proves remarkably reliable. The person who has failed and recovered a dozen times possesses wisdom that cannot be taught in any classroom. This explains why elite military units like Navy SEALs subject candidates to extreme stress through Hell Week. The training isn't merely testing their existing capabilities, it's transforming them through controlled exposure to adversity. Each challenge forces adaptations that couldn't be developed in comfortable conditions. The process deliberately creates anti-fragile operators capable of thriving in the chaos of combat, not by avoiding stress, but by metabolizing it into extraordinary capability. But here's where things get truly interesting. Antifragility at one scale often requires fragility at another. For a forest to remain anti-fragile, individual trees must be allowed to die. For evolution to produce extraordinary adaptations, most mutations must fail. For an economy to remain healthy, inefficient companies must be allowed to collapse. This creates a profound ethical dilemma in human systems. We instinctively want to protect individuals from harm, to prevent any failure or pain. But when we eliminate all volatility from a system, we make the entire system increasingly vulnerable to catastrophic failure. By preventing small forest fires, we enable devastating infernos that destroy everything. By bailing out banks, we create a financial system primed for even greater collapse. The implications are uncomfortable but unavoidable. Some degree of volatility, failure, and creative destruction is necessary for any system to remain healthy over time. This doesn't mean we should be cruel or indifferent to suffering, but it does suggest that attempts to create perfect stability ultimately backfire. The more we try to eliminate all disorder, the more we guarantee eventual catastrophic disorder. This paradox appears in personal development as well. Parents who shield their children from all disappointment and failure often raise adults incapable of handling the inevitable challenges of life. Universities that protect students from intellectual discomfort produce graduates unprepared for a world that doesn't offer trigger warnings. Companies that never allow small failures eventually experience massive ones. The pattern is consistent. Systems deprived of appropriate stressors become increasingly vulnerable to any disruption. So how do we apply this insight to our own lives? The answer lies in a strategic approach to disorder. Instead of avoiding all stressors, we should distinguish between beneficial and harmful volatility. We need to identify areas where we can expose ourselves to variability with limited downside but enormous potential upside. For instance, in your career, you might maintain a stable job while allocating time to high-risk, high-reward side projects. In your investments, you might keep the majority in safe assets while allocating a small percentage to opportunities with unlimited potential returns. In your learning, you might deliberately seek situations where failure provides rapid feedback without permanent consequences. This approach requires a fundamental shift in mindset. Instead of asking, "How can I avoid all risk and uncertainty?" you begin asking, "How can I structure my life to benefit from volatility rather than merely endure it?" You start seeking positive black swans, rare events with enormous positive impact, while protecting yourself from negative black swans that could cause irreparable harm. The key insight is this: anti-fragility is transferred when you have more to gain than lose from volatility. The cautious person who never takes risks eventually becomes increasingly vulnerable to any change, while the person who strategically exposes themselves to controlled randomness continuously grows stronger. Over time, this difference in approach creates an exponential gap in capability, influence, and impact. Consider two professionals with identical starting points. One focuses on minimizing all variability, staying in a comfortable role, avoiding conflicts, and sticking to proven methods. The other deliberately engages with uncertainty, taking calculated risks, embracing difficult conversations, and experimenting with new approaches. After a few years, the second individual will have developed capacities, networks, and opportunities that the first cannot access. The gap continues to widen with time because one is growing through volatility while the other is merely aging through stability. This brings us to the ultimate revelation. In a world of increasing uncertainty and rapid change, anti-fragility isn't just advantageous, it's essential. Those who learn to harness disorder will thrive in the coming decades. while those who cling to stability at all costs will find themselves increasingly vulnerable. Consider the modern education system. We train students to excel at standardized tests with clear instructions and single correct answers. But the most valuable skills in today's economy involve navigating ambiguity, adapting to changing conditions, and recovering from failures, precisely the anti-fragile capabilities that traditional education fails to develop. The most successful educational approaches now deliberately incorporate controlled chaos and failure. Project-based learning, where students tackle messy real-world problems without clear solutions, develops anti-fragile thinking. Coding boot camps that immerse students in challenging projects with tight deadlines create the stress that transforms novices into capable developers. These approaches don't work despite their difficulty, they work because of it. Or look at healthcare. We've focused on treating symptoms rather than strengthening the body's natural healing capabilities. We shield ourselves from every minor pathogen, potentially weakening our immune systems. There's growing evidence that some exposure to dirt, minor infections, and environmental challenges in childhood actually leads to stronger health later in life. Another example of antifragility that challenges conventional wisdom. The hygiene hypothesis suggests that the rise in allergies and autoimmune disorders in developed countries may partly result from environments that are too clean. Without exposure to a diverse range of microorganisms during development, immune systems become hyperreactive or misdirected. The very attempts to create perfect sterility may contribute to chronic illness. Another instance where eliminating all stressors weakens rather than strengthens the system. Even in mental health, we're discovering that some forms of stress, when properly structured, lead to post-traumatic growth rather than disorder. People who successfully navigate difficult experiences often develop psychological strengths unavailable to those who've been protected from all hardship. Resilience isn't an innate quality, but a capacity developed through exposure to manageable challenges, an anti-fragile response to adversity. The most effective therapeutic approaches now incorporate controlled exposure to stressors. Exposure therapy for anxiety disorders deliberately confronts patients with the very situations they fear, allowing them to develop new responses. Dialectical behavior therapy teaches skills for tolerating distress rather than avoiding it. These methods recognize that healing doesn't come from eliminating all stress, but from changing one's relationship to it, from fragile to anti-fragile. But perhaps the most powerful application of anti-fragility is in how we structure our identities. If you define yourself by a single role, capability, or belief system, you become fragile to any change that threatens that foundation. But if your identity encompasses multiple domains, perspectives, and capabilities, you become anti-fragile to life's inevitable disruptions. Consider what happens when someone builds their entire identity around a corporate career, only to face unexpected layoffs. The fragile individual experiences this as an existential crisis that may lead to depression or worse. The anti-fragile person, whose identity incorporates family relationships, community involvement, creative pursuits, and lifelong learning, experiences the same event as a meaningful challenge that opens new possibilities. Same stressor, radically different outcomes based on the structure of their identity. Here's where we confront the most unsettling truth. The modern obsession with comfort, convenience, and certainty has created a society of increasing fragility. We've removed the very stressors that would make us stronger. We've optimized for efficiency rather than robustness. We've sought to eliminate randomness rather than benefit from it. The result is that both individuals and institutions break under pressures they could once have absorbed. We've lost the anti-fragile wisdom that sustained human civilization for millennia, and we're only beginning to rediscover it through the pioneering work of thinkers like Taleb. This loss has profound implications. Political systems that once thrived on vibrant debate now fracture under ideological differences. Economic systems designed to eliminate all downturns become increasingly susceptible to catastrophic collapse. Social structures that shield people from all discomfort produce generations unprepared for reality's inevitable challenges. The very institutions meant to protect us have, in many cases, weakened our capacity to adapt and evolve. But there's hope in this understanding. By recognizing the dynamics of anti-fragility, we can begin redesigning our institutions, relationships, and personal practices to benefit from volatility rather than merely enduring it. We can distinguish between harmful stressors that should be minimized and beneficial stressors that should be embraced. We can structure our lives to capture the upside of uncertainty while limiting its downside. This doesn't mean blindly seeking hardship or rejecting all stability. It means developing what Taleb calls a barbell strategy, combining extreme safety in some areas with calculated risk-taking in others. It means maintaining optionality, preserving the freedom to adapt as conditions change. It means favoring practical wisdom over theoretical knowledge, recognizing that the most valuable insights come from direct engagement with reality's complexity. So what separates the extraordinary from the average? It isn't talent, luck, or even hard work alone. It's the counterintuitive ability to structure your life to benefit from volatility rather than merely enduring it. It's recognizing that strength comes not from avoiding stress, but from encountering the right kinds of stress and allowing them to transform you. The truly extraordinary have always understood this. They don't just survive disruption, they need it. They don't simply overcome obstacles. They seek them out as opportunities for growth. They recognize that the most valuable capabilities emerge not from comfort, but from navigating the edge of chaos where adaptation occurs. This understanding changes everything. It transforms how we approach education, healthcare, business, government, and personal development. It reveals why protecting systems from all harm ultimately weakens them, and why certain kinds of disorder are not just necessary but beneficial. Consider how this plays out across domains. In business, the companies that last centuries aren't those that optimize for quarterly profits by eliminating all variability. They're those that maintain redundancies, excess capacity, and diverse revenue streams that seem inefficient until crisis hits. In relationships, the strongest bonds aren't those that avoid all conflict. They're those that develop mechanisms to transform conflict into deeper connection. In creative work, the most compelling art doesn't emerge from perfect conditions. It comes from engaging with limitations, contradictions, and uncertainty. The question now is not whether you will encounter volatility and uncertainty. In today's world, that's inevitable. The question is whether you'll be fragile, merely robust, or truly anti-fragile when facing it. Will you break under pressure, return to your original state, or emerge stronger than before? The answer depends on how you structure your life, career, relationships, and mindset. It depends on whether you seek to eliminate all stressors or learn to distinguish between those that harm and those that strengthen. It depends on whether you see disruption as something merely to survive or as the very source of your advancement. In a world of accelerating change and increasing complexity, antifragility isn't just a philosophical concept. It's the fundamental difference between those who thrive and those who merely survive. It's the hidden principle that has always separated the extraordinary from the average, now finally made visible through Taleb's revolutionary insights. If this exploration of antifragility and success has made you think, challenged your assumptions, and sparked a deeper curiosity about how to structure your life to benefit from disorder, then make sure to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with those who need to hear this truth, because in the end, the most dangerous risk isn't taking too many chances, it's taking too few. It's becoming so attached to stability that you lose the very capacity to adapt. The truly extraordinary have always known the secret. The right kind of stress doesn't break you. It transforms you into something beyond what you could have otherwise become.